everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are super excited through the innateofbe.org membership platform to be offering our career conversation series. Today, we are going to address a really epic topic, but before we get to that, I just want to remind everyone that, well, first say thank you. Thank you for being part of our innateofbe.org community. And to remind everybody that these types of conversations are really meant to support you in every phase of your career and also to connect you with each other, because innateofbe.org is all about community, as you probably already know. So without further ado, just quick logistics. This is interactive, so we'd love for you to participate, speak up. That's what this is all about. When you're not speaking, to remain on mute, and then if you are going to be talking, maybe mute some of those Slack notifications and email chimes that we all get all day. That would be awesome. Want to introduce our amazing speaker today. I have Shelby Walkley with us today. She is a passionate mentor, leader in technology, speaker, and advocate for confidence in the workplace and using your voice. So she's going to be leading a career conversation about how to humble brag effectively. So thank you so much, Shelby, for offering your expertise. We're so excited to hear what you have for us today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the introduction. Hi, everyone. As Erin mentioned, my name is Shelby Walkley. I'm super excited to be talking about this topic. You know, this topic evolved from a lot of very organic conversations that I've had with people over the years that resonated with the concept of being confident and sort of projecting that self-advocacy at work. And that's why I gave it the cheeky title of how to humble brag effectively, because part of it is brag, part of it is humble, and I think all of it kind of comes into focusing on your own career growth. So yeah, before we begin, again, just wanted to thank everyone. Like Erin said, we appreciate you all joining in. It's very great to see people sort of investing in their career, and I especially know that this week has been hard on a lot of folks. There's been a lot of things that have been hard for people to watch about what's going on around us. But within that, we can also see sort of the silver lining that having our voice and using our voice effectively is a skill that's not just used in the workplace. It's something that's topical for every part of our life. So I hope there's some sort of things that can come out of this which can be helpful. Cool. So to kick it off, I had a quick icebreaker, hoping to just take 5 minutes for this. So I just shared a link in the chat. Let me know if you can see it. But the link should take you. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Awesome. Great. So if you can go to that link, you'll see a little ideas board. I'll share my screen also shortly. But, I always like to begin anything with expressing gratitude, like just about things in our life. So I want you to think about at least one thing that you're grateful for, and whatever that thing is, like put it into one of those 3 buckets. Like, is it something that you're grateful for this week, this month, or just always? So let's take just maybe 1 or 2 minutes for people to sort of share those things. I think it'll be fun. And as you see other people's cards popping up, like feel free to click on the thumbs up if it's something that resonates with you too. So let's do that, and I'll just share my screen also so we can see how people are filling it out. Awesome. Like it, lots of people grateful for their family. That's for pursuing masters. Cats and dogs at home. Yes, I resonate with that. Even though I don't have cats and dogs at home, but I live vicariously through other people who do. Starting my first job after graduation. Oh, wow. Someone did that this week. Congratulations. And yeah, this is all anonymous, so feel free to share whatever catches your fancy. Home air conditioning works. Mine doesn't, so. spending time near the ocean and hiking in nature. Awesome. My interns did me proud, and I'm so glad they can continue during summer too. Wow, wonderful. This is lovely. Thank you so much for everyone who's sharing. It's I can definitely like pick up on a little bit of themes. I think, you know, family and friends, and also just having support systems is definitely something that is meaningful to a lot of folks. And you know, it's good to remember it even during tough times, that if those are the things that we are always grateful for, that constantly show up in our lives as things that are valuable to us, then we should kind of make sure that we are actively prioritizing sort of deriving joy from those things. Being able to work from home, that's awesome. Cool, thank you so much. This is wonderful. We're going to keep the board. You can feel free to add stuff to the board as the thing goes on. I'll leave it online, so feel free to sort of chime in with things. Yeah, with that, I think the plan for today is I'm going to walk you through some of my thoughts on the topic of how to humble brag effectively. I have a couple of quick slides, so we'll spend about maybe about 15 or so minutes just walking through that content. After that, the rest of the session is really for each of you to either, you know, share your experiences, add your comments about what you think is important for you, and get some feedback from the group as a whole. And we can also have some time at the end for just open questions. Yeah, so with that, I'm gonna kick it off with just the actual presentation. Give me a second to set it up. All right. All right, can everyone see my screen? Yes, okay, awesome. All right, cool. So this topic, as I mentioned, it's super close to my heart. I have always felt that, you know, I always felt that self-advocacy is never easy. Especially for me, I kind of felt alone in it a little bit, because I saw all these other people who did not, like, it came so naturally to them that, you know, they could very comfortably talk about themselves. They sought out help easily when things didn't go wrong. And I felt that, you know, part of the reason that I found it hard was it maybe felt like a little bit of a cultural thing. I'm South Asian. It's very common in the culture where people don't look at, you know, talking about yourself is looked at as a vice. It's almost like, hey, you're boasting, and that's not too nice. And things that are said that are positive about you, it's assumed that they only mean something if someone else says it. So that was part of the discomfort for me, at least. I felt that as I sort of grew up and entered the workforce, I also realized that inherently as women and other marginalized genders, often there's this sort of this, you know, sometimes it's direct, sometimes it's indirect, but there's this feedback of, you know, to us, which is hinted at, like, don't be too loud, and, like, you know, go in the position of a supporter rather than a promoter. And especially when I was early on in my career, it was just something that I implicitly absorbed. And if I did speak up in a meeting, like, I was so cognizant of the fact that I'm like, there's all these big executives, and here I am, you know, tiny little me, like, saying, opening up my thoughts. And I was very grateful for people who encouraged it. But I can understand that there can be a lot of people who don't experience that, because of their culture, their gender, or even the society that they're in. And so it's hard to really overcome it and know that that is not something that just like it's not something that's expected to come naturally. Like for some people it does, that's great, but don't feel alone if it doesn't come naturally to you. Because I think for most of us, the inner voice is honestly the biggest hurdle that we have to overcome when we are trying to advocate for ourselves. Because we have to think about our desire to be seen and heard, and but not also to be seen as bragging. So, with that, we know that it's not easy, but I do inherently think it's something that's extremely important. And that's why I kind of like to reframe it, that when we think about these things, we should very consciously remind ourselves that we are not bragging, rather we are advocating for ourselves. And I think those two ways of looking at it are really shifting our mindset, to something that's positive. And especially for people who've got that feedback, that they struggle with it, or they've got that feedback that, oh, if you just told me more about all the wonderful things you're doing, I would have had an easier time understanding it. Like, know that it is something that is a way for you to just do right by your career by building on that skill if you don't already have it. And some of the examples of what I think happens if we learn to correctly advocate for ourselves is that it's critical for us to make more money. Women often don't make as much money as our male counterparts, and some of it is chalked down to, oh, well, they don't actually tell me all the wonderful things that they do, and no one can know what your true worth is unless you take the time to really highlight it to them. Things like promotions, which can also lead to higher pay, but they are also dependent on you articulating clearly what it is that you add value to in terms of the business. Things like resources. So, if you're a manager or if you're building out a team, you can get resources and headcount if you advocate for yourself. If you show people that, like, here's why I need talent, here's why I need to grow this team out, like all of those things are part of that same self-advocacy. It requires you to actively state all the wonderful things that you do. And I think in general, like success as however people measure it, but it depends on your ability to sort of make sure that your value is visible to the right people. And that's why the energy and time that you spend on being comfortable, on being confident, and on being genuine in advocating for yourself, I think is well worth. I think that time is well spent. So how exactly do we get better at it? We know it's important. We know it's difficult. My thoughts are that it's a three-step sort of narrative. So one is, as I said, a lot of the hindrances are sometimes just mental. Like, we have to get over some of our mental narrative that we want to change. The other thing is sort of reframing the external narrative, and I'll talk more about that. And the last step is to just practice, because like all things, humble bragging is also a skill. Advocating for yourself is a skill. And so any good skill that we want to improve on is something that takes us practicing it. So so I guess I wanted to take like a couple of quick examples just to show what this looks like. And as I was talking to people, I asked a lot of folks, like, what actually are you thinking when you feel you're having trouble, like, talking positively about yourself? And one of the most common things that I heard was that I'm talented. Why shouldn't my work just speak for itself? And in itself, that's that's a reasonable thought, because our work should be sort of demonstrative of the things that we do well. But think about it in this perspective, like, if you're thinking of yourself as, I'll do great work and someone will reward me, you're essentially saying that I'll shine brightly and someone will eventually notice it. But what if you're just shining your light brightly in the wrong space where no one's actually around to see your light? So you still have to find a way to show people that. And that's where I kind of shift the focus, that yes, your talent should speak for itself, but people have to be able to see it. And so if for some reason, like they're not seeing it because they're distracted, you know, your manager has 10 different reports, they're just not paying attention, then it's up to you to sort of just make sure that they are, they have visibility on the things that you're doing. So that's a way to sort of like mentally shift the focus from my talent should speak to itself to only visible work is appreciated. The next one, I think, you know, this is another thing I heard very often, like that if I share stuff, like it'll attract envy. I think it's a very valid thing to think about. It's an understandable concern. Sometimes it is founded because inherently, I believe that being vulnerable is hard. It's not something that comes easily. And also sometimes you can have coworkers that are just, you know, not, they're afraid of sort of how you might make them look. But instead, again, here, I like to reframe my thinking that if I start thinking of myself as me sharing something for the benefit of others, and if I truly believe it, that my sharing my wins is something that will positively affect other people too, I think that's a good way to sort of not just think about it, but it's a good way to also make yourself feel more comfortable doing it, that, you know, you're sharing for everyone's benefit. Everyone shouldn't have to go through the same pain that you went through to get something done in order for it to be, you know, something that they can learn from. Like, why don't you also share that, hey, this was a hard thing, but here's how I managed to pull it off, and here's how I managed to do it effectively. So think of it as, you know, you shouldn't keep your secret as success. Let other people learn from your examples of what worked, what didn't work, and be authentic in your desire to sort of want to benefit other people. And I think that will come across. So that's a good way to sort of like, again, shift the focus of what it is that you're trying to do. This one again, you know, I want to work. I want to not talk about it. I think, you know, this is a lot of the people here are interested in technology, and it's a very common thing for engineers especially to think. So just, you know, I began my career as an engineer, and I always felt like a little bit of a misfit because I was very talkative, and people almost looked at that as something that disqualified me from being an engineer, that they're like, well, she likes to actually talk. So it's a weird sort of implicit framing that just happened for technologists at some point. But instead, I actually, over a period of time, I inherently realized that whether it's stated in the job description or not, communication is a part of every single job. And there can be different sort of metrics of success in that, but you'll always notice that sharing your results, sharing your learnings, sharing the issues that you encountered is important for you to make people understand what's going on, what worked well, and what didn't. So you can think of even, you know, even if I was a PhD candidate or something, like even they who are sort of quintessentially, like, you know, they're supposed to be focused on the craft of like the actual research that they might be doing, but even they have to explain to their peers, defend their thesis in front of other folks, to be able to say like, here's what I did, here's what it achieved. And that is something that inherently results in your success if you're able to just talk about it. So I would stay away from the I'm an engineer, not a salesperson sort of mindset, because inherently all of us at some point have to sell in order for nothing else than to make our own lives easier. Oops. All right. Yeah, this is my final example of sort of the different things that we think of in our mind, and I'd love for you all to share other things that you think of. But you know, this one is another common one that I heard, that like, well, celebrating wins is it's just flashy. It's not me. And, you know, who cares anyways? Like, why would anybody else care about my win? So here, my sort of counter argument to this is that you're not just doing it for yourself. I think inherently when you're celebrating a win, you're doing it for others too. You're boosting morale. I don't know of a single person who can say that if they had a success, like, you know, it was just them. Like there's usually a team of people who's doing something. Like maybe you did the final work, but someone else kind of provided input that was helpful. I think all of those people need to hear from you that the thing that they also helped in on was, you know, was something that was actually like that resulted in a tangible win. So I would say that, you know, take that time out to express that gratitude to your team, to people who chimed in, to people who sort of helped enable that, because I think inherently celebrating is important. It's an important social way that we kind of all grow and move forward. Now I'm going to quickly talk about the external narrative. And this is how do we actually take, you know, once we've got comfortable in our own mind, how do we actually convert that to something that we can communicate easily to others? So I'm going to quickly walk through an example. So, you know, the standard version is just the downplay, not standard, but like, I guess for this audience, like I think some people might resonate with this, that even if you had a success, you could just say, no big deal, anybody could have done it. And that may be accurate, but it's not helpful. You could go the complete other way, which is you could brag about it and just say, I was just so awesome. No one else could have done this. And you could, you know, anchor that way. Instead, here's sort of like my suggested path, where you focus on sharing the win with authenticity, and you talk about sort of, you know, that you learned something, that it was challenging. Challenging automatically implies that you took on something that was hard, but considering you're saying you finished it, that means you are able to take something hard and finish it. And it's still accurate. And you know, if you actually had fun doing it, or if you learned something, or if you enjoyed interacting with all your teammates, like add that to your sort of share. And kind of focusing on like how you did it is also helpful for people to understand that, like, you know, you pushed hard, or you reached out to 5 different teammates to like learn what you needed to finish the project. But I think it's helpful once you've sort of shared like a tangible achievement, that you finished it in half the time it was expected to take. And again, this is just an example. Like if you have something which is a measurable metric of success, I do think you should include it. Again, it's helpful for you, it's helpful for others. And I think in general, it's overall much better than either of those other 2 versions, where you just share something, but like no one really learns from it. So, oops. With that, this is the end of the presentation. I come to my push to all of you, which is my humble brag challenge. So I have 2 versions of it, depending on your comfort level. You can start with the personal, move to the public, but I do sort of, you know, push you all to find ways to get yourself more comfortable. Like, so these are sort of like my steps to just start practicing more. So for like on your personal side, like just start documenting big wins. Even if it's just for yourself in your little notepad, it'll make you more comfortable of just thinking about your own achievements. And the benefit is that next time you are up for a promotion, you can actually include some of those things. Like you're just practicing, like, you know, bragging to yourself about all the great things that you're doing. And here I recommend like just be specific so that you remember what you were talking about at the end of it, and try to do it at least once a week. The other thing is sort of, you know, level 2, when you get more comfortable with level 1, is to do it publicly. So I would actually encourage people to post their humble brag in some forum, which is, you know, not just you and your mom. Like have some of your colleagues involved in it. If LinkedIn is something that you're more comfortable with, or Twitter, anything. But like you might have a team forum, like maybe there's a team chat room or an email forum, and just say, hey, you know, this last week, here's what I managed to do. And again, share it as a learning, try to do it regularly, at least once a month. And I think that'll go a long way in making you feel comfortable in picking the right words, in shifting your mental mindset, and doing this. So yeah, with that, that's the end of my presentation. I will, these slides will be shared out at the end as well, I believe. Jesse, I think that's correct. And yeah, I'll pause there and see what your reactions are so far. I can see, thank you, Susie. I can see your face, and I appreciate, does anybody have things that resonated here, or would anybody like to share other things that they think about? Yeah, and do people have the ability to unmute themselves? Because I'd love to actually hear people.
Yes, you
Okay.
should have the ability to. If that's not the case, someone hit me in the chat, but yes, you should all be able to.
Awesome, awesome.
And we encourage everyone to turn on their cameras if they'd like to participate as well. I know it can be a little vulnerable, but I'll do it too.
Hello.
Hi, yeah, I'm Susie. Like, I thank you so much for having this session. It's like so great. Like, I'm really looking forward to hearing like all these like valuable like advice on like how to humbly like brag, and which is kind of like I always find it like a little bit hard for me to do, because actually I consider myself as a little bit shy, like in like, especially like when it comes to like just celebrating your achievement, or like, yeah, it's like celebrating like all the like hard work you have done. And especially like I have a question actually here. So I just graduated from my master's from of business analytics from Emory University. So I'm currently actually looking for my first job, which is kind of a very challenging time for me to do it. And actually I have a question. So do you have any like specific kind of advice like for like maybe very young professionals or very early stage professionals when they're heading out to their like finding their careers and maybe like seeking their like maybe like heading to the industry? So is there any specific advice for like for people like me which have a specific standing in this challenging time?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and again, thanks so much for sort of sharing your feedback as well. I think especially for people who are starting out with the whole job search process and things like that. Like, I think it's definitely a very interesting time, because you're sort of shifting from this very structured, like, school, college. It has some structure attached to it, whereas looking for your first job is super unstructured. Like, there's just so many things that can go on there. My recommendation, sort of in line with a few things that I talked about, is practice your pitch well, because a lot of especially, I think, like, I've been a manager now for a really long time, and I think with graduates, with sort of fresh graduates, like, often what separates one fresh grad from another one, like, even a lot of the resumes can look very similar, like similar college and things like that. But what separates is the people who can clearly articulate why they are gonna really add value even as a fresh graduate. So take that time, like, especially, you can use some of your early interviews as more of practice sessions. Like, don't be too attached that, like, I have to nail the first interview that I ever get, but like, use it to practice how you communicate to potential employers about the value that you bring to the table. And I think that's good for, I mean, even people who've been in the industry for some time. Like, if you're ever looking for a job, like, I think it's still good to have your pitch well practiced enough where it doesn't seem rehearsed.
Yeah, that really helps. Yeah, I will try to do that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else like to share any experiences, any observations? Did something resonate, or did something seem like it didn't make sense?
I like the humble brag challenge because I think it could really help me to keep myself accountable for doing it. So I really appreciated like the tactical advice for the challenge. So it gave me kind of that perspective on how to like implement it into my day to day and week to week and month to month.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that feedback. So yeah, more on that. Like, it's actually I really like the way you phrased it. Like, keeping yourself accountable. I think that's extremely important. Like, we at the end of the day have to be in charge of our own careers and our own sort of success. And for me, I think the gap that I used to feel very early on in my career was that I would at the end of the performance cycle, I'd be like, I think I was awesome, and everybody knows that, right? Like, I know I'm awesome, so like, does my boss know I'm awesome? Like, it was just sort of this gap of those things. And then I realized, like, I kept noticing all the things that I was doing, but my boss wasn't necessarily paying attention. So how would they know until I have like documented it in some way and done that? So it was a good learning for me early on, to just, if I notice something that I'm doing well, like to actually write it down, and then I can find a way at the end of the sort of thing to kind of aggregate it, package it in a way where it's like, here's what I did and here's how it helps the business. And that just, like, it makes your manager's life a whole lot easier if you just kind of do that.
So I have a comment on that. And this is something that I've noticed when my managers are trying to support me and they're trying to promote me, but they have to justify my promotion to someone higher up. So they send me a questionnaire that I have to fill out. And this is where, if you had taken the trouble to write down things back when you knew why it was so cool and what you accomplished, that's easier than being given like less than 24 hours to develop your pitch right then. That is a difference between you getting a promotion or not. So the other thing is that if I have to write recommendations, which I've had to do for interns, it really helps me if they already have stuff written down that I can kind of use as a reference, because I have to deal with a lot of things. There's a lot of things on my mind. They're not like the only thing that is on my mind. And so it's really hard for me to remember all the details. I remember a general feeling that they were cool, they were awesome, but that only fills out like a couple of lines in the recommendation.
Yeah, that's an absolutely great point. And you actually highlighted something which is very important, like that sort of the general feeling of like someone being awesome and being able to translate it into these sort of very specific things that they did that make them awesome. I think is also like beneficial for us, right? Like, I think women in general have often said that, like, we don't want these biased sort of promotion things that happen where it's like, oh, everybody knows Chad is awesome, but like, what did Chad really do? And if you create that own thing for yourself, that like, I can tell you why I'm awesome because look at all these 5 things that I did, you create that same standard for others too, where it's not a feeling based thing that happens when people are sort of like rewarded, pushed up for promotion. Like, it's something very tangible that you can refer to. And Lan, like, thanks for sharing that, because I think you're completely right. Like, it makes people's life easier if you can kind of just help them quantify why you're awesome.
Shalvi, we had a question come through in the chat from Shreya. It says, I don't speak much and feel short on points. I think I don't do justice when I am talking in my interviews. What should I do to improve that? Yeah, that's a great question to have. So a little quick background here. I've somehow ended up spending a lot of my time in the last couple of years on interviewing on both sides. So, for my career trajectory, some of the best, like just for my personal situation, like it helped me more when I switched a job in terms of a promotion or a raise. And so I ended up interviewing a lot. But I've also been a hiring manager, so I have seen a lot of people in interviews. Like, I must have done like 100 in the last like just year probably. And I think here again, I see that same pattern of, there are some people who become, maybe through practice, but also maybe through just that intentionality, like they can clearly sift through like what is valuable to this person who's interviewing me. And usually, like, the role that you're applying for is a good guidance. Like, that is what you should be focusing towards.
but also think about that company, and also think about like, is it a startup? Is it a big company? Like those things can really change what they're anchoring at. Like, I mean, it's a stereotype, but just for the sake of this argument, like, startups are usually looking for scrappy, adaptable people who can deal with a lot of different situations. Whereas in most cases, big companies want sort of depth of knowledge in one area, and someone who's really going to sort of, just move something forward. And of course, those things can change. But I think, Shreya, to your particular point, like, I would again highly encourage, just write it down, like write down, your perfect pitch in terms of like the points that you want to hit on. Like, here's what you want to talk about in terms of your background. Here's what you want to talk about in terms of your experience. And here's what you want to highlight, like as a personal skill that you think is going to really speak to the interviewer. And I think if you've clarified that in your head, before you actually get to the interview, it'll be so much easier. And you can keep adapting, like as you try out these different messages, like you'll get a little bit of feedback from people, like see what's working, see what's not. Sometimes I hear from people who've who said that, like, hey, I worked for 10 years, but I worked as something totally different, and then I switched to a technology career. And so how do I like tie those things in together? Because I do have 10 years of experience, but this is my first coding job. And if you like spend some time like thinking about that, like you can find something in your sort of experience that helps. Like, even if you've never had a coding job before and this is a coding job, like you can still say that, like, I learned how to manage stakeholders, or I learned how to manage a project. Like think about that upfront. Like it's much easier to just not have to do it on the fly. And it takes practice, but I'm sure you'll get better with it over time. And also you can ping me on Twitter and I can help you refine your message. So I was curious, like just, in general, when you all think about, just sort of like speaking up about yourself, like, are there other things that kind of like, Susie shared some and Lance shared some, like what other things do people encounter which stop them from sort of being comfortable just talking about yourself? Hey, Carolyn.
Hello.
Hi.
So to humble brag, I have a tendency to kind of go the other way, to be on the bragging end of humble brag. And when I do that, I kind of realize what I did and I feel a little bit bad. How do I temper that message?
Yeah, that's a great thing. And, for what it's worth, I still, I think it's okay. Like, I think a lot of us have too far and too long defaulted on the other side, on the downplay side. So, if some of us want to take one for the team and go in the other direction, I am totally fine with that. Like, I am supportive. I'm supportive of that. But I would say, like, if you want to sort of shift your messaging a little bit, like, again, for me, the element that I think about is authenticity. Like, if you weren't just like, inherently, I want people to know that I did something that's cool, but why is that? Like, why do I really want people to know that? Like, is it because I want people to understand that, like, this was hard for me, like, I had to work a lot to like get this done? Or is it because I noticed that other people really struggle with it and look how easily it's, what am I authentically trying to sort of share? And I think if you focus on that, and if you shift your messaging to how can people learn from my experience, I think it can shift your messaging a lot. And like,
most of the time I'm amazing myself, like, wow, look what I did, I'm awesome.
Yeah.
But I don't want to put that in a report. So I mean, that's really my authentic feeling. It's like, wow, look what I just accomplished, that was really great.
Yeah.
So that's that kind of messaging.
Yeah, again, I totally get it. Like if you're proud of your own achievements and you want people to understand that you've that you're proud of your own achievements, I don't think there's something wrong in that. Like I think again, you said a key thing there, that you're so proud of yourself for having done something. I think that is great. Like I think people want to know that you are sort of happy with the challenges that you're taking on and you're able to deliver on them, and that makes you feel confident, that makes you feel good, and that probably makes you way more likely, like if someone else is super struggling with it, like there's always going to be someone who's struggling with the same thing that comes super easy to you. You're putting it out there that like, I'm able to do this really easily. If you really need my help, you can come to me. Like you can add that. And even if you don't feel the second part totally, like I still think you can learn from it. Like I still think you can learn from teaching others who are struggling with that same thing, because it helps. Like there's a lot of things that I might do which just come naturally to me, but when someone asks me how I do it, is when I actually think like, what was the framework I was using to solve this problem in the first place? And then that helps me create something else that can like be another awesome thing that I do. So
I really like your last point. I'm kind of framing it like, I have an aptitude for this. This comes easily from me. So use me as a resource.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, actually, I have a follow-up like question. So from like what like Shelby like said, like actually so like as a young like like when you first went out for that, like for example say like maybe the first job interview, like first like interviewing for like first jobs. So sometimes you will feel like sometimes there's a little bit like inequality about like mentally like way between you and maybe the other side, because like actually you feel like you don't have like that much like kind of like whole bunch of like work experience to talk about, and maybe like the other side is like way more senior like than you, for example maybe for example like manager or director. Like how possibly people could like overcome that kind of like a little bit like mental like kind of like difficulty or something, to just how like to show that you can bring value to the company like from what you have learned like from school or like your projects or something.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I would first push you to think about the fact that if a company really needed a senior person who's done this for ages, they would advertise the job to as a senior position. Like I think people sometimes feel that the only reason a company is hiring someone fresh out of graduate school is because they're cheap. Which is true. Yes, you're going to have to pay them a lot less than you'd have to pay someone with 10 years of experience. But the other fact is that people who are straight out of college are, one, bringing in a lot of energy, hopefully, and they're also bringing in a fresh perspective. Like you're especially like, again, depending on what the company is doing, like consumer companies are well known to hire a lot of people who are straight out of college, because consumer products are often directed towards youngsters. And so you can bring in that perspective of like, even as a user, or even as a possible consumer, about just like, here's how other people my age think, and here's why your product does not make sense. Anyways, that's just a fictitious sort of an argument, but I do think that your ability to learn things, your ability to be humble and to adapt is actually quite valuable. Some people who've been in the industry for a long time, like they're just not going to switch technologies, they're not going to switch anything. So if the company wants people who are coming in with that fresh perspective, there's probably a good reason to. And you should use that fact that you have spent time like studying some of the things that people are doing. You have spent time like just bringing in your enthusiasm of wanting to do a good job. Like that is valuable. And also like it's interesting, but like another thing quickly I'll add there is also a lot of people actually, for their first interview, they tend to give this very long speech about like everything they've done ever. But honestly, people are looking for a quick summary of why you are a good fit for this job and why you are enthusiastic about this job. Like your enthusiasm in a lot of cases can outweigh a lot of other things that you may lack in terms of skills. And
yeah, I really like the point. I think that based on like what you said, I think that probably like doing much like research and maybe doing a lot of like homework, doing your homework like before like you're conducting an interview to show actually you're passionate about for that job, or like for the other side, or like the interviewer, might be a very like important thing, like especially for maybe young people like me. Yeah, I think I really like the point. Yeah,
that's good. Anyone else want to share what they learned when they got their first job and how they chose to talk about it? Because like for me, I think when I was entering the industry, I'm like, I don't know anything. I literally just learned this language that I knew that this job was using yesterday. But but it's funny. Like I did well at my first job because I was also one of the only ones who was willing to do whatever they asked me to do. Like they're like, do you know this is back in the day, but like I was a Perl programmer, and then one day my boss comes in and says, who knows PHP? And apparently nobody did. And so she looked at me and she's like, do you want to learn it? And I was like, sure. Caroline, Perl, yes, I agree. But yeah, I was the only one who was willing to actually pick up something that no one else knew, because I mean, I was young and I had no fixed notions about what I wanted to do. Daria, I think, are you trying to say something? You're muted.
Thank you. I was just going to say, for me, I think I battled and still fight with imposter syndrome. So a lot of times in my early career, kind of forced myself to speak up in meetings, whether it was a question or a comment, because I would hold myself back thinking like, I don't know the answer to this. And so what I like about this whole humble brag idea is, I documented it on a weekly basis. You start to train yourself and remind yourself that you do know what you're doing. So I think this is really helpful, but I do think there's a tie-in to imposter syndrome and confidence and bragging.
Yeah, absolutely. The imposter syndrome thing is definitely very, very real. A lot of people struggle with it. I think also, and that's why, like, to your point, it really helps if you keep reminding yourself, because then it's easier when you have those feelings of like, when you have those moments of feeling that, oh, I'm actually, just I'm not really good at this, I just got lucky. Like it's helpful to go back to that list and know that you actually did some work to get to where you are right now. Oh. Yeah, Manisha, you're right. I do use like quite a lot. I believe there are some people who count your likes in every single sentence. I would totally bomb that. I would totally bomb that like counter.
One thing that I'll share that's been helpful for me in regards to getting better at interviewing, and I've seen myself since my first job get more and more comfortable, is just learning to deal with the physical discomfort of like being in an interview and getting asked those questions, because the physiological discomfort of being in fight or flight and having that anxiety response is what makes that so unbearable sometimes. And so just learning to ground yourself and calm yourself when you're in those high pressure situations is helpful, because then you have better access to your executive functioning and you can prioritize your speaking better and you're more articulate. And so just learning to use breathing techniques and things that help calm the physiological discomfort of being in those situations is really helpful.
Yeah, that's very true. Like that's a very like good point.
Yeah, absolutely. I also used to find it very awkward every time I would enter one of those meeting rooms, like picking which chair to sit on. It was just, I was like, what's the right answer here? Am I supposed to sit at the head? Am I like, it was just weird. And I think, again, spending some time thinking about these small moments that make us uncomfortable, and actually, coming up with some sort of script of what you do in various situations, I think is helpful. And I love the suggestion of breathing techniques, because I think it can help us get through a lot of difficult situations. So Lan shared something: for my first job, I got my resume reviewed and practice interview with a friend who had once been on a hiring committee and gone through a lot of interviews and resumes. That feedback made me understand better how to present myself. That is a great suggestion. I think when we are writing our own resumes and when we're thinking about our interview practice, we're actually very much in our heads. So there's something that we, if I did a project, I know exactly what I did. I know what worked, what didn't work. But when I'm talking to a third party, they don't have that same context that I do. So I think it's helpful to get some independent person's opinion on how it comes across, so that you can actually incorporate some of that feedback. I usually show my, my project, like my resume thing, to my husband, and he'll be like, what does this mean? What are these acronyms? And, to me, they're super common, but they don't make sense to someone else. So you might not take all of that feedback, but it's helpful to have it so that you can incorporate what makes sense.
Yeah, I find it useful, like sometimes, like especially like actually when I apply to my like grad school or something, sometimes it also works, because sometimes like you feel like it's very normal like to say something, but it may not like make that much sense, like if for people that who don't maybe in this field, or maybe who don't have the context to understand it. So sometimes maybe just have another people or another like mentor or your friends to just have it like read through it, and just they will figure out, like for example, what does not make sense for them, and you can just probably say like think that of a like alternative way to saying that, to make it more straightforward or easy to read or talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Clear articulation is always, I think, a good goal to have. Make it easier to read, bold the important points. Cool. All right, if we don't have any questions, I guess my only things to sort of wrap up were that just a reminder that yes, slides will be shared with all of you, and I would still highly recommend trying the humble brag challenge. Like again, I really think the practice is what makes it easier, especially for people who have issues with it. So take whichever one that you want to try and just roll with it. And yeah, I am available on Twitter, so if anybody would like specific things that they're thinking about, like how do I phrase this in a manner that's I mean, I'm sure you can all get like the framing it positively. Like I don't think that should be a problem for anyone, but if you're just trying to make sure, like how do I frame something in a manner that's impactful, that gets me to highlight the right things that I want to highlight, like I'm happy to sort of like help with that, especially if you're writing up your promotion proposal or something. I'm happy to help with that, so find me on Twitter. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Shelby. And as she mentioned, we will follow up in an email with her slide presentations and information on how to contact you, like her Twitter handle and all of that good stuff. All right, everyone. First, we want to say thank you for being a member of the need2be.org community. As a reminder, we're offering more career conversations and other awesome programming for the month of June, free of charge. If you found this valuable, please not only share it with a friend, but also considering upgrading to premium so that you can access more events in the future and access to our content library, which will eventually house all of these recorded sessions so that you can go back and watch them whenever you want. All right, everyone, that's it. Thanks so much for joining us. Have an awesome day. Thanks to Shelby again for offering her expertise. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much, Shelby. Yeah.
Bye, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.